Welcome to the House on Fire podcast. Our aim is to light a fire for Jesus in the homes of those who listen through encouragement and equipping. Let's partner together to advance the gospel in the next generation. I am your host, Lucas Jackson, and I am passionate about seeing more people on fire for Jesus. When you listen to the House on Fire podcast, you'll hear from people you can rub shoulders with every week at Bethel Church, because all of our guests are from our church family. These are people striving to love God, love others, and to serve the world. Today we have Abby on the podcast with us. Abby, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Glad you're here. Mm-hmm. Yes. And just as we kind of dive on in today, just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your household.
Yeah. So my name is Abby Saylor. I recently got married, so my household currently is me and my husband.
Yes, it is.
And my immediate family is from Iowa, and I moved up here for school. I go to NDSU, and then my husband's family lives in Fargo. So we have a larger family now in the area.
Yeah. And so you're in school, getting your master's, right?
I'm in my master's program.
And what's the degree going to be in?
The degree will be in mechanical engineering with the intention of education focus.
Yeah. So you want to teach that?
Yep.
Like middle school, high school, college?
Any? I'll hopefully have the credentials to teach all of them.
But. Yeah. Awesome. No, that's great. And what's Paul do for work?
Paul works at Applied Engineering in town and does some contracting for other smaller firms.
Yeah. And he's only been in that position a few weeks, right?
Yeah. He just started a couple weeks ago.
And he went to NDSU as well?
Yep. For mechanical engineering.
And that's where you guys met?
Well, we met through crew at NDSU.
Okay.
And then he started giving me rides to church, and we got to know each other through that.
Now I've got questions for your husband.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So did you guys both serve in crew all 4 years, like undergrad?
Mm-hmm. But he's 4 years older than me, so he was a senior when I was a freshman.
Okay, so there was a slight overlap for your time in crew.
Yep.
Okay, and for those who don't know or not familiar with what crew is, what is that?
Crew is an interdenominational campus organization that is passionate about connecting students to Jesus. So that looks a lot like evangelism on campus, creating opportunities for students to connect with the Lord.
Yeah, good deal. Awesome. And what worship service do you and your husband normally attend on a Sunday morning? So if somebody were to rub shoulders with you, they know where to find you.
So you'll probably catch us at both most weekends.
Yeah.
Because Paul is on stage fairly often playing the guitar, and I am in kids ministry or around, but we normally attend this 10:45.
Yeah, for sure. And then what areas do you guys serve in? You mentioned a little bit. So Paul serves on the worship team, plays, I was going to say guitar, but there's a difference between electric and acoustic.
He plays both electric and acoustic.
Okay. And that's kind of his area that he serves in. And you mentioned kids ministry.
I do fifth grade on Sundays most of the time. And then I've started producing with the tech team as well.
Awesome. Good deal. And what life group are you and your husband involved in?
We're involved in the Bethel Young Adults group. It's functions a little bit more like a student's ministry than just one life group, but it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the conversation we're going to talk about today is missions, the impact and blessing of seeing God at work in the world. And you've been on a few missions experiences before, and missions is a high value for you. And so when did missions become important to you specifically?
I guess it's a hard question a little bit to unpack for me, because it started to become important as I continue to follow Christ. Okay. And especially as I dove into that more when I chose to follow him like with all my heart at the end of high school. So missions trips specifically started to become more a part of my life through college, because crew focuses a lot on outreach.
Yeah. So you went on like a first missions experience or something like as a senior in high school?
I served at a camp,
Okay.
Christian camp. And that was kind of more of an outreach type of ministry that I jumped into.
Okay.
But starting to understand, like, no, this is something that Jesus says and like calls us into, but also walks with us in. And so serving people with the heart of leading them closer to Jesus, as for non-believers and believers as well.
Yeah. So then you get involved in, in Cru, and you're in college, NDSU, and then you go on your first missions experience with Cru. Where'd you guys go and what'd you guys do?
Cru had a campaign in the fall of 2022. No, 2021. Yeah, fall 2021.
Okay.
To go to the Middle East, an undisclosed location in the Middle East that was having a specific event that a lot of people would be around, and we would have an opportunity to meet a lot of people. Yeah. So several college campuses went, but we went for a week and got to experience a lot of the culture, meet specifically college students in that area of the world, and then talk to random people from all over the world who were at this event.
Yeah.
So.
And for those listening, there's a reason Abby's being very generic with the location or lack thereof. So for anybody wondering, like, why is Abby not telling us the details? It's because we're not privy to those details. So for good reason.
It's just to protect the people that we're interacting with, because it's illegal to be a Christian there.
Yep.
So.
Yep, absolutely. So you went there. So did you do that multiple times, or did you have other experiences throughout your college?
I only did that once, and then I started to see a trend in my direction towards including and inviting my classmates into a relationship with Christ, and using my place and position as an engineer in like serving people and connecting with people over that. So I looked into other missions opportunities for using engineering in like being placed overseas or wherever. And I got connected with an opportunity in Bosnia. And so I did a whole like 2.5 months internship in Bosnia. Okay. So I got to experience a little bit of, it was more like logistics of a nonprofit, but, and so the nonprofit taught English and worked with students and families in the town, but they also had a lot of, interesting connections with engineering, and specifically the kind of engineering that I do, which is plastics.
That's awesome.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a really cool connection, and a point that started to open my eyes a lot more to how people interact with the world, why they believe what they might believe, because Bosnia is very culturally Muslim. And yeah, my friends didn't always know exactly what they believed. And so.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's super, super cool. What does missions mean to you, and how has it disrupted your life?
So missions, looking at just the dictionary definition, it's an assignment. So as a student, I have a lot of assignments.
Yes.
And I started to like reading the Great Commission and, seeing what Jesus thought about inviting people of all backgrounds and, into relationship, and how he does that, made me a lot more interested and I guess intrigued to discover more what missions mean. And it to me means like following orders from the person that's leading us, which is Jesus, and but being supported by him too. Like he will be with us always. That's a promise as well. Yeah. And how has it disrupted my life? In a lot of ways, like an engineering student should have an internship in a company if they want to be successful in a company their third summer of school. And they should get that internship and then continue working with them part-time through the year, and then get a full-time job with that company. Yeah. It's a very normal like path, and it's not a bad thing. It's really what my dad and mom wanted me to do originally. It's just like, hey, it's wise, it's smart, this is how it works well. So logically, made sense. So I actually applied for that, an engineering internship with missions my second summer.
Okay.
With a full intention that I would do that and then follow the normal path beyond that. And it didn't happen. So I was like, now I have a decision to make. Am I going to still follow this nudge or not? And I still felt pretty strong that I should follow that nudge. And it led me to a really good experience to experience the Lord in a deeper way too. Yeah. But
no, that's awesome. Would you have done it differently? Not that, I mean, in some sense, it's not a good question because you can't really go back, so it doesn't really matter. I guess the Lord's doing what he's doing, but.
Yeah. I don't think I would have done it differently. Obviously, I've changed and I am who I am because of the experiences that I've had. So in that sense, no, but there's definitely as I was looking for jobs or trying to see what was next, it was kind of hard to rectify and communicate to employers that, hey, I have a cool experience. So they weren't super interested in that. And so it was a little okay, well, what's my purpose? That, and just discouraging in a sense because I wasn't the perfect engineer, quote unquote. But
yeah, for sure. So would you say in a sense by going on that missions experience that it, from a humanistic perspective, it kind of cost you the steps in the process, and that could probably cost you from potentially getting the job that you could have had?
I do think that was a sacrifice from it for sure.
And is that I mean, maybe it was harder then, maybe than it is now, but is there maybe some bitterness or just discouragement in that,
Yeah, but as I analyzed any of that discouragement or frustration, it's all rooted in people pleasing and a desire to live up to the expectations of other people.
For sure.
So I kind of dismiss it eventually, but it's definitely disappointing in a sense. But
yeah, you don't put as much weight into it. Yeah, no, I mean that would be not everybody's going to make that decision, and so it's fascinating. Can you give us an example of why missions matters to God in the Scripture? I mean, there's tons of passages that we could look at. I mean, we could spend hours upon hours just reading the passages that would emphasize the importance of missions. But maybe you want to lean in on one that would be super helpful for our listeners, just as they are contemplating missions and the conversation at hand, and what's the biblical mandate that God would have for us when it comes to missions specifically, in the context of as a believer, in the context of church. You had. Most of your experiences were in college, and so would love for us to lean in with that a little bit here.
Yeah, I think the scriptural themes or points that I started to think about more is when Jesus invites Gentiles into relationship with him, and the Jewish leaders are really angry and frustrated at that. I think was a really convicting part for me because I'm who am I to decide who deserves and doesn't? Yeah. It's not my job, but sometimes I think that I have that control or something like that. So looking at Romans when to the Gentiles or to the nations is often a word that's used there. Yeah. I see just a clear consistency in God's character to have a chosen people and a chosen nation, be the Israelites until Jesus, and then it was all of his chosen people, and we're here to follow the Spirit's leading and invite people of all backgrounds and diverse experiences into a relationship with Christ.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a great way to look at it because there's the nation of Israel in the Old Testament was supposed to be a light to the nations. That's why, and God even says, "Hey, I didn't choose you because you guys were great. Yeah, I chose you so that you would be obedient and yet be an example to the lost." And then for referencing the Jewish people in the New Testament and now the church, and so this is a biblical mandate for believers throughout. The creation of the world.
Yeah,
and it's fascinating to me. I think sometimes some people can get a little bit. or they think they're a little higher on the totem pole than they should be, so to speak. And yet God has created everybody in his image and would call the church to go about evangelizing, sharing our faith, and that means everybody.
Yeah.
So it's I appreciate that very much. It's maybe weird to ask the question this way, but simplicity, I think, sometimes brings clarity. So, is missions a biblical mandate for the church and for us as believers? And if so, why?
Yeah. I mean, I do think so. As I mentioned, it's an assignment, right? A mission is something that you're given, or an assignment, and to me, it's an honor. Like when I look at that, it's an honor that Jesus would give that assignment to us, right?
Yeah.
And so I definitely can see that mandate in the Great Commission. And, mission's part of that word.
Yes, it is.
But it's a co-mission too. And so that mandate isn't just like a burden or a heavy weight that we have to bear.
Yeah.
It should be a joy to stand with Jesus, our Lord and Savior, and drawing people to him.
Yeah, for sure. No, absolutely. I definitely agree. Why should missions be a priority in our church? And, and maybe even, and then we can maybe lean in on maybe even why should it even be a priority and not exclude kids or students? Like when I say church, I mean every little, think of the Coonley's little baby Henry, who's like a few months old, all the way till, however seasoned of an adult you are. So I include everybody when I say church. And so why should missions be a priority for us as a church?
Yeah, I think, the church is the body of Christ, and we're the people that are reaching, and that's the assignment that we're given.
For sure.
And so as a church, looking at both like local missions and global missions, all alike, it's all rooted in inviting people and reaching out to people into a life-giving relationship. And so, it should be a priority because Jesus said so, because he's saved us and invited us. And so why would we just sit idle and not do anything with that? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
And student ministry. So the other area that I serve that I didn't mention is I'm honored to lead the 11th and 12th grade girls. And so I've got to walk with at least the 11th graders for a couple of years. And I think students are at an age where they're starting to figure out where their faith lies, and put together all the pieces from the things that their parents have taught them, that they've grown up going to church or not, their perspective on the world. And I don't know, this does kind of carry over into any adults too, but so in student ministry, like we're equipping students to stand firm on their faith when it's tested in any season. That could be in high school, that could be out of it, whatever. And I have seen great, immense growth in my own walk with Christ by watching other people start to come to know him, or start to discover this love, this new hope.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, have you what's been one of the cool things that you've seen on a missions experience that has just been life altering or just super impactful for you, like the work of God, maybe through you or somebody else? Like maybe let's think about maybe a couple of those that has been helpful for you, because I think a unique thing about missions experiences, and maybe I should address the fact there are some people who would think that mission trips and experiences is a waste of time and money, and I think there are some that could be potentially. I don't know. But I think it's a great way to help students and other people realize, like, okay, the gospel's bigger than Bethel Church or Fargo or Moorhead. I'm not at all of the opinion that doing mission trips is not a good idea, and we should just send money. At times, sure, I think we should do that, but my first missions experience totally radically changed my mind, and I went to seminary because I thought I was going to be a missionary overseas.
Mm-hmm.
So it just missions is just has defined me, and I mean Jesus has defined me, but yet the desire for missions and what I see in Scripture and what the church can do has really just defined a lot of who I am. And so, what have been some of those cool things that you've seen on missions experiences that have just been cool to have a front row seat to see?
Yeah. I'll point out from the different ones. So going to the Middle East, I got to talk to 2 college-age students that were kind of just, curious about our faith as well as wanting to share about their own.
Yeah.
And that impacted me a lot because you see like how someone grows up, how the environment that we are all placed in drastically affects the way that we look at the world and the way that we're able to relate with others so like I was in that conversation able to go through the gospel, and it didn't make any altering changes like right then and there, obviously, but just watching her specifically like encounter that and be like, I had a very different impression of this because of what my parents said or whatever. I don't know, made me start to be like, oh, okay, so some of these people like they haven't heard the true gospel. They just have like an understanding from as the enemy and whatever. So that was really humbling, right? So. And
was it humbling? And you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming because of your experience, maybe there's a sense of like, well, surely you've heard everybody's heard the gospel,
yeah,
but that's not a true
No.
statement. That not everybody has heard about Jesus, and there'd be many places all over the world where, man, they may not even have the word Jesus in their language even yet, and so I think it's appropriate to say it's a falsehood that everybody on the planet has heard the name of Christ.
Yeah.
And so is that kind of what you were thinking because of your shared experience? Like, well, I've heard about Jesus my whole life. Surely you have.
Or heard the right perspective anyway. Because like...
For sure, yeah.
Especially in Islam, right? They have Jesus.
They do, yes.
It's a different perspective. So you got to think about that. But
yeah. And they would say that Jesus was just a prophet like a good man who did good things, but not that he was the Son of God. Actually, they wouldn't, I don't think, use that phrase at all, that he was the Son of God.
That would be blasphemy.
Through my Chicago training this summer on our missions experience with our students, we got to learn a lot about that stuff.
Yeah. And just understanding different cultures and perspectives and being like, open mind, open eyes to what other people are walking through and the fact that they might not understand something that you like do, but
yeah. No, absolutely. Well, it makes me think we have a foreign exchange student live with us, and I was taking him to the bus stop or whatever this morning, and he asked a question. His mom's coming to town they're going to hang out a little bit and stuff. And he goes, hey, is this expressway, is it free? And I was like, well, yeah, this one is, but not all highways are free. And I didn't think about this till after the fact. I need to lean in and ask him, but my assumption is like, well, maybe he's never been in a place where you got to pay to drive on a road. And so in my mind, for me, in my mind, I was thinking, well, for me, that's kind of normative. Like, from Austin or go to Chicago, like anywhere, you're going to be in places where you're going to pay. And I was thinking, I need to ask him this later today, but I was thinking, I wonder if he's thinking that's crazy. You Americans, you got to pay to drive on a road like that. Because maybe, and I don't know, this is me just creating this narrative, but I'm like, in his mind, potentially, he may be thinking, well, that's crazy. I would never have to do that. Or that would just be outlandish. It wouldn't be an experience that it would be familiar with. And I think oftentimes we can make assumptions about other people or other people groups or wherever they grew up, and their dynamics are different and unique, and they don't have the same mindset. And so it's important to make sure to ask lots of questions, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Try go deeper, make connections.
Yeah, no, for sure. Any other specific cool things you'd like to share about missions experiences that you've been a part of?
I think there's kind of a stigma. Like I had a a student that I was discipling through Crew that really felt like she should go on a mission trip. And there was one, Crew does some beach evangelism ones in the summer.
Okay.
And so there was one that she was like, I'm going to go, or I'm pretty sure I'm going to go. But my parents really do not want me to, because they don't think like there's the outcome of it is going to be good or viable. Like, will you see anyone come to Jesus? Because like, I doubt it. And so I was kind of walking with her through that, and it started to become clear that most of the time the effects that you see on and from mission trips is in your own heart, right? You're going to see a deeper understanding of Jesus's heart for people, or a wide range of things can happen, and can see that change in your heart, and gaining a perspective for how the gospel is moving through another area of the world is something that I saw a lot in like Bosnia in the Middle East. And I also went to Chicago to serve with the inner city. But
yeah, it is. I think of, we had our missions experience this past summer to Chicago and the Vaughan area, which is like Little India.
Mm-hmm.
And we're coming back, and one of our students is like, guys, I don't think our student ministry we're not as connected as we should be. We're not we need to get after it here. I mean, that was my phrasing, but he was leaning in and saying, hey, like, man, we're going out and doing prayer walks and walking up to, hey, what's your name? This is my name. Hey, we're just out working with this organization just to tell people about Jesus. And, and we're doing a little get together in the park. We'd love to have you. And so by doing that, his eyes are open to the fact that, like, hey, you can do these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not going to kill you. You're going to survive, and it's going to be okay. And so by him coming back in this text thread that's been going on since June or whatever, and so he's the one that's kind of pushing guys. We got to be more involved. We got to, man, we need to see those in our youth spaces that are by themselves. Like, there shouldn't be nobody sitting by themselves. I'm like, man, you preach it, homie. Like, that's what I'm saying every day. And so now this experience helped fuel this fire in him.
Right.
And we may never fully see the effects of all that. But I think oftentimes, I was talking with a married couple this past week, when it comes to reconciliation, our job is to say, hey, this is, this is what you said, and this is how it hurt me, or whatever. And then it's their job to respond, or, hey, I'm so sorry. Like, but we can't control their response. Yeah. So with missions, our job is to be obedient and to do what God calls us to do. And it's God's job to produce the fruit that he wants to do. And so that is, I say that out loud. That doesn't necessarily make me feel better, but it keeps me in my lane, knowing that my job is to be obedient, and God's job is to produce the fruit and to genuinely save people. And then it's back to my job of then, helping disciple that person, help them to understand more of what it means to follow Christ. And so our job is to be obedient.
Yeah, definitely.
So cost is always a thing. We're the richest place on the planet, it seems like, in the States. I actually have no idea if that's really how it is. That's just what I hear everybody say. Yeah. Nonetheless, we got money, at least the majority of us. And so, the cost. So maybe speak into that a little bit, because and not only just the cost, but maybe we can lean a little bit more with obstacles that may be barriers of why people may not go on an experience of some sort. So leaning a little bit on the cost, and what advice would you give to others about that?
Yeah. So thinking about the cost, and like, if especially in that lens of other obstacles, an obstacle that at least my parents had on going to Bosnia. Bosnia is in Eastern Europe, and so it's not like potential. It could have not been the most safe environment, right? We were completely safe in terms of any war things, but I think that's often like, we really value our comfort and our safety, and just 100% knowing that we won't be in any danger. Yeah. And that's something that I think is maybe even bred into us as like sheep, right? Sheep highly value their comfort and safety, right?
Yes, that is a great way to put it. Abby, I agree.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but then you look at when Jesus asks his followers to count the cost. the point of counting that cost is realizing that we won't ever be able to pay it. He did anyway. And so taking a leap of faith, knowing that cost is what he's asking. And so then look at monetary costs specifically, especially as a college student and in an environment of college students going on missions. You see a lot of people stepping into a support raising or ministry partner development season in preparing for a mission trip, which I saw a lot of growth in. Personally, because you're sitting down with people, you're calling people, you're sending letters, inviting them into partnering with you in prayer and to care for the needs that you have.
Yeah.
And so it's a humbling experience. It's a chance to sit down with people and talk about hard things, which prepares you for evangelism, right?
Yes,
you're sitting down with people and talking about hard things. And yeah, I saw a lot of growth. I watched Paul walk through 2 seasons of ministry partner development. Paul is my husband. If I didn't clarify, earlier.
Did.
Yeah.
Define ministry partner development. So the other phrase was support raising.
Yeah.
So that could be face-to-face meetings, sharing about what you're doing, and then inviting people to pray for and give financially.
Yeah.
And that could be sending letters as well to friends and family, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I guess it could be text messages. I get a lot of text messages. So I guess it could be a text, I guess.
Yeah. It's communicating about your heart for the ministry that you're stepping into or intending to step into, why God is calling you there, what are the things that you are nervous about so that people can be praying for them. Yeah. Like it's more of a holistic, like I'm inviting you into my life and into this experience in a very special way. Right?
For sure. So that'd be the support raising side. The other, what's the phrase again you said?
Ministry partner development.
What does that mean?
So like I kind of mentioned this holistic idea where it's kind of trying to, you're inviting a person into the service or the missions opportunity financially, prayerfully, and then you're keeping them in the loop, right?
Yeah.
And so like when I went to Bosnia, my ministry partners were getting emails and are able to email me weekly and asking questions and praying, and I'm interfacing with them more than just like, thanks for your money and bye. Which is a way that you can partner with missions and be a really good, vital member and kind of fulfill that Great Commission in a sense too, is like you are part of what God's doing over there, here, where, whatever. Sure. If you are, if you're in a season or in a space where you are unable to go per se. But.
Yeah. So maybe it's a better phrasing that emphasizes the holistic aspect of, and not just a fundraising component, which is probably the aspect we think about it the most when we think about support raising, because that's probably a generic term that's used often for that process. Yeah,
because I mean, when you think about it, especially in public school systems, like I grew up in a public school system, we had like 3 fundraisers a year, I'm pretty sure, where like my sister and I would walk to every neighbor and be like, would you like to buy knives? I don't know.
Sorry,
you're good.
I've bought so much stuff from students. I'm like, how in the world have I? Anyway, sorry.
No, I get it. So it's something that we've done a lot and we continue to do. So, all the more, why wouldn't we want to be generous in our finances for other people? And then when I think about cost for like myself, and you talked about how we spend our vacation days maybe, is like having a heart and a mindset to tithe money into a missions fund for other people, for yourself, where this is all going for what the Lord is doing around us, specifically that we feel a nudge to be a part of.
Yeah, one of the best, my father-in-law says a lot of great phrases. I just steal them from him because they're so good, and I don't feel the need to reinvent the wheel. But he says something along the lines, we never owned a second house.
Yeah.
We never owned a boat. We never owned, whatever extra thing that you could park in a garage that cost thousands of dollars. But he says, my daughters have seen the world multiple times. Mm-hmm. And I remember my first missions experience. I'm like, man, it rocked my world. I'm like, man, I had no idea. I had no idea what the Lord was doing all over the world. And so there is a component to where we need to process through what does it look like to save some days up, vacation days, or even, okay, like maybe we don't purchase certain things so we can save up money for missions experiences. Like, I do think there is a responsibility on our part to do what we can. But maybe lean into this a little bit, because I think some people, I guess in my understanding of the culture that I'm in, we have a hard time understanding what something free is. Because every time I've been like, someone's asked the cost for something, I'm like, no, it's free. Like, yeah, I get it. But how much do I owe you? And I'm like, no, that's not how this, and then I feel this need to give a little mini sermon about
grace.
This, it's free, like that. So you can't pay me for it. Actually, now I'm offended you want to pay for it. So anyway, so maybe lean in a little bit on, because there's people, I think we in our culture, I'm speaking for the American culture in many ways, it's like a pride thing. Well, if I can't pay to go, by golly, I'm not going to ask anybody to help me or whatever. And so maybe lean in on a little bit on that, just to encourage those who may be in that particular boat when it comes to potentially trying to grab other people to help send them out.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary to ask, for sure.
Yeah.
But again, I think that relying on the Spirit to give you boldness in those conversations, again, prepares you for boldness in conversations and knowing what it feels like to be like, I don't know what to say here. I'm scared, but yeah. And you're also opening a large space to watch the Lord work in big ways, right? When I was support raising for Bosnia, I got to the end. I finished and I hit the deadlines or whatever. I was a little late on the plane ticket deadline, but we figured it out. God worked in that. But I got to the end and I was like, I had somebody else ask me, hey, I would love to jump onto your team. And I was like, well, I don't have any extra. I'm done. And she was like, but I'm still going to help. What's your rent for the summer? Because I was paying rent for it. And that was an immense blessing, right?
Yeah.
And how would she know that I was intending to pay double rent, right?
Yeah, for sure.
or whatever. But
yeah, an elder here, Joe Goda, often says, man, like, you don't know unless you ask. And if you ask, you may be blown away by the response that people are going to give. So you should probably ask. Yeah. And if they say no, then they say no. It's all good. Like, so I just don't say no for other people. Let them tell you no. And so just presenting the ask, I think, is helpful.
And yeah, as you're praying through the process, like I also saw God work a lot in my heart, in the hearts of those around me. So I mentioned the cost of safety and my parents being concerned about that. Yeah. I was flying out in the week that I was flying out, my mom just like shared that she was really at peace with it. Yeah. And just like, I would never have guessed. Like, I was just prepared to go without her being at peace and whatever, and just seeing God completely soften her heart and make her eager to pray for me and to talk to me and see what I was up to or whatever. It was just a big blessing too.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Where should a person start if they're learning about missions for the first time and they're like, I'm interested. What should I do? Where do I go from here, per se?
Yeah. I mean, so I'm an engineer, so I end up kind of jump into the immediate logistical problem solving. But it kind of just understand why you are into, like, what are you interested in first. So if you're like, I just want to experience it for a little bit. I just want to see what God's doing in another part of the world or of the country. And then there are multiple organizations, but I would start with your church and see what your church is up to and how you can be involved in your church and what they're doing. Yeah. And then you can, beyond that, you can be like, I think I'm ready to give up my whole summer, right? Yeah. Yeah. And look into, do I want to be able to do my profession somewhere else? Building houses in Honduras as a group in our church does. right? They get to use their talents and gifts that God's allowed them to grow over their lifetime.
Yeah.
And they get to use them to bless other people. So do I want to use those? Do I want to intentionally follow those sorts of business tent making ministry, kind of like the Apostle Paul does?
Yeah.
Or am I gifted with kids, and here's a missions opportunity that is serving kids all day, every day. Okay, sounds good,
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, Pastor Gary kind of oversees missions here at Bethel, and I know he's trying to put some thought process into opportunities for families.
Yeah.
And, group went to Honduras last spring break,
Yep.
I believe. And actually, if I remember correctly, Ryan, who's kind of on that missions commission, I think that was like the first trip that we've had post-COVID.
They went the year prior to.
The year prior,
so,
okay, okay. So that's kind of revamping up, I guess. So we're trying to get back in the rhythm and as the world is open back up and all that stuff, which has been good. And is it wrong to maybe lean in on the potential trip that you've got going on that we may want to let the world know about? Is this an okay time, or do we want to hold off on that one?
I mean, I haven't talked to the missions council yet, so I don't know.
I haven't either, but I mean, I think it's okay to mention it.
Yeah, I mentioned that I had gone to Bosnia. My job as an intern for the summer was partnering with their camps for kids, and the way that they do their ministry is inviting kids and teens into a camp and connecting with the parents outside of the camp throughout the weeks of those. And I have my older high school girls that are starting to be eager to serve and love people around them. So I was like, here's something I want to challenge them to do. Not just the girls, but the guys too. So intending to bring a group of high school students to Bosnia for 2 weeks next summer.
And I believe we're looking at June 15th through June 29th. It's a 2-week period.
Yeah, June 17th. Yeah, 15th through the 29th.
Yeah, because that would include the travel days or whatever.
Yeah.
And really the heart behind that, I mean, you talked to me about it, and I was like, well, I mean, if I had to dictate what we as a church do, I'd be like, yeah, if we can get 52 missions experiences, if we can get one going on every week, forever, which I don't know if we'll ever get to that point, but so basically we're kind of putting feelers out to see if we can get a handful of people who'd be interested in going, because it's a 2-week experience.
Yeah, 2 weeks. It's a English camp, so it's basically like VBS here, but without Jesus songs. So
I love it.
And so if we have 10 students plus me and Paul probably, then they can invite almost 50 other kids to be part of the camp. Otherwise, they don't have enough space or people to. For sure. And so that allows them to connect with more parents and more people in the community. Yeah. So it's a cool opportunity for us to serve in a logistical way. And then it's 3 or 4 hours of the day that camp is running. And the rest of it is what we call chafe in Bosnian.
Chafe. Now, I'm intrigued. Lean in here. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Chafe.
So they have that word for basically just chilling with your friends. Awesome. And so multiple times while I was there, we would just go to a coffee shop and sit for 4 hours and talk. Yeah. We don't do that in America. And it was just a really cool opportunity to get to know somebody. And so I would love to invite students into a slower pace of life. Yeah. And this relational culture. And so that's the intention right now. Yeah.
So we are, kind of on the hunt a little bit. We are chatting with the Missions Commission here soon or whenever we get around to it.
Yeah,
so
I emailed it. I emailed Gary.
Email Gary. So, And for me, when somebody comes up to me and is like, hey, Lucas, I'd like to lead a missions experience. I mean, the answer is almost always like, yeah, you do. And how do I help make that happen? And so if you are interested to be upperclassmen, like junior, high seniors.
School, maybe 10th graders and then beyond, if someone's like, I really want to go too.
For sure. Great. So it could be a college student, it could be an adult, any of that kind of stuff. So it could be a pretty cool, unique experience and to be a part of. And so If you are interested and you're listening, you can reach out to us. I'll make sure to put my email in the show notes, and that way somebody can email in.
Yeah.
Even though half the world probably has my cell phone. So either way, you can get in touch with us here at Bethel Church, and we'll see if we can add you to that team. So does location matter when it comes to going out on missions, missions experiences or mission I prefer missions experiences more so than trips for whatever reason. Nonetheless, it's semantics.
Yeah.
But does location really matter when it comes to being sent out by God on this mission to do a certain thing?
Yeah.
So location.
So one thing I was processing maybe a couple years ago was like God in bringing you on a mission experience is drawing you closer to himself, not to a place. And so in a sense, no. What matters is the heart behind it. And so if you feel a strong nudge that God is like, go to Bosnia and serve those people there, and you say, no, I'm more comfortable and I'm involved here, then I think that's where it matters, right? Yeah. Is being wholly surrendered to the Holy Spirit and saying,
that's right.
Yeah, I'm gonna go where He's leading me. But no, there's plenty of mission here. So
there are.
And in Chicago, and there's so much things that God is doing, and he may ask you to be a part of it, in whatever capacity. So,
and there could be some that would be like, well, why would I go to Bosnia when my neighbor across the street needs to be served? I think it's a fair question. I don't think it negates the fact that we should be influence the nations all over the world. I don't think that's justification enough for us to be like, hey, you're going to Bosnia or wherever, like, you should probably serve the person next to you, which that's probably true, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be going to the nations.
Yeah.
And so what would you say to somebody who would maybe be on that camp? Like, I'm not going to go, and maybe let's assume that they are genuinely serving their neighbor, because some people they may say that, but they're not really. So what would you say to the person like, well, Abby or Lucas, man, I serve my neighbor across the street all the time. I've got this great relationship. I'm doing all I can to care for them. Why should I go somewhere else to tell other people about Jesus?
Yeah. Well, we see Jesus talk about in Matthew 24 when the end of the age will come, right? And that's after all of the people that he's calling towards himself in all of the nations are surrendered to him, right? Yeah. And so that's the assignment, right? So if you feel that God is saying through the Holy Spirit's prompting, like that you need to be the one that goes to this country, this people, then go. Like don't stay. Don't say, well, but there's other things here. I'm like, yeah, there is.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are pretty church saturated in this area, so it's less of a wrong assumption around here to say that people have heard the gospel. Yeah. A lot of people haven't heard the gospel in other places. So,
and I'm fascinated. I often think like, who matters more, those who don't know Jesus or those who know Jesus? And I'm like, well, yes. There, I don't necessarily
there's
think,
no more.
And Jesus does say, hey, I didn't come to save the healthy or the sick or the healthy. I came to, I'm botching the phrase here. Have to help me out maybe, but I came to seek and save the lost. That's not the one.
It's not a doctor, it's not the healthy who need a doctor. It's the sick.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. And so of course we're going to care for those who are healthy. Discipleship matters, all of those things. But there's a component where part of me, in my own personal preference, this would be my own preference, not necessarily a biblical theological perspective in a sense, but in my mind, I feel like I tell myself a little bit like, okay, I matter just a little bit less because I'm in the family of God. And what I mean by that is I'm saved. So at the end of the day, I'm good. I need to live for the Lord. So there's a sense where I have a sense of peace because of my identity in Christ, and there's other people who don't have that. So that's what I mean when I say the lost matter just a tad bit more. But that's more of my personal way to communicate that, to remind myself to not get too comfortable.
Yeah. Well, you see Jesus in the parable of the lost sheep too, and the lost coin and the lost son, right?
Yeah.
It's just radical intentionality in reaching out for the lost.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe let's speak into just here a little bit like the 1040 window, and maybe somebody's never heard of that term.
I hadn't heard about it until there's a group called the Traveling Team that mobilizes people around the country.
Okay.
That they came to Crew and talked about the 1040 window, and I was like, never really heard about it, but it's the latitude 10 to latitude 40.
Yeah.
North of the equator. And it's the window from like West Africa to Asia and the eastern part of Asia. And it's just kind of like a highlighted window on the map. And I don't know the exact statistic, but it's like 99% of the people in that window haven't heard the gospel.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But it might not be 99. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're good. It's one of the most, it's the most unreached section on the globe, maybe something along those lines. And so those people don't have a lot of people, or maybe anybody potentially in their community or their town who even knows who Jesus is. And
it's kind of that way because it's one of the hardest, it's some of the hardest countries to like be an expatriate in. So it would be really hard for an American to go live there.
Yeah.
But obviously in God's will, there's always a way. So if God's calling you to any of those people, like go. But when you think about like, Jesus also said, all the nations will hate you, right? And so even though it's hard, if you look into early missionaries and a lot of different countries and things, like they were brutally persecuted, and they went because Jesus said go.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to bring that up, because of the fact that there are plenty. I cannot remember. It's something like 6,000 people groups, something like that. Yeah. Don't quote me on it. You can, I guess, Google it and probably find out. But and not all those people groups have been reached.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that America is, here in the States it's America, but there's multiple people groups that are represented even within America. So it's not like America's one people group really per se. And so just to bring awareness, and there's even a great, I think my father-in-law actually back in the day when I got saved at 15 and was interested in missions, Operation World was a book that was put out, and I actually learned on the Chicago mission trip from one of my professors at Moody this past summer who was there, who told me they put it into an app form, which is pretty cool. And it's actually pretty awesome. I'm on it right now and I'm looking at, it looks like Pakistan, and the app's kind of cool. It shows me that there's 1,249 people praying right now for Pakistan. Like right now all over the world, there's 1,249 people on the app right now, and they're praying specifically for Pakistan. So if you're thinking like, man, missions, and like, I'm intrigued here, like you can get this app. I mean, you can purchase the book, but Operation World is an app you can get, and it'll tell you a lot of the statistics and the information about each country, and how saturated it is with the gospel or lack thereof. So that'd be a great resource for those who are interested in missions to be able to utilize and to mobilize, just to learn a lot more about missions.
Yeah, I that's a good point about prayer so we mentioned prayer and being like a ministry partner. And so when you're looking specifically at, a friend of yours or a person in your life that is on a mission in a certain context, like, yes, you're praying for them. Yeah. But pray that your heart would be, softened and open toward people around you, people in specific areas, like, the Lord will highlight the people that you need to be praying for, but specifically open that space helps a lot, right?
Yeah, for sure. And in many ways, I don't know what it is as we as a church that give, but maybe I should have looked this up beforehand, but we give a ton of money to local missions and global missions, and a big part of that is because of God's people here at Bethel giving their tithes and offerings, and we can utilize that. I mean, it keeps does salaries or whatever, and it keeps the lights on, all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
but the primary heart behind tithes and offerings is for us to be able to mobilize God's people to expand the gospel all over
Yeah.
the world. And so I do think it's important. And I don't say that to be because I have an agenda where I'm trying to convince somebody that, you need to get after it and give it away more. But maybe you do. Like, I mean, that component about the sacrificial giving of God's people, like, God, man, like we utilize that to advance the gospel.
Yeah.
And it's just been a joy to see God work in that. And so, we're coming to our time here at the end, and I've got two other questions. One's not necessarily on our list, but I want to lean in here just for a moment. And I really need to do a whole episode on this, but when you're going to, you've been on a few mission trips, and so you're leaning in and having conversations with people you've never met before.
Yeah. And
if the Lord opens the opportunity for you to share the gospel, my assumption is you would do that, and you have done that. So what just maybe explain, like, if you were going to share, if you had, this 5-minute window and you're hanging out with somebody, you may not have time to, you may not even open the Bible.
Yeah.
You may not even, but what would be just a way that you would express the gospel, which there's a ton of ways to, but how would you express the gospel if we were having a conversation at a coffee shop in Bosnia and you had a few minutes? How would you lean in and express the gospel to that? And maybe let's just assume that person, for conversation's sake, is like curious, and so tell me, like, what do you mean by Jesus, or maybe whatever the question may be. Let's just say, assume the door was open. How would you go about communicating the gospel to them in that few minutes you had?
I tend to start with a context of love. Like, what does love mean to you, and how have you experienced love? Who loves you the most in the world? And then, like, what if I told you that somebody loved you more than them? Right? And we see Jesus is the embodiment of that, because he died for you, right? He sacrificed his life and took on your bad, the ugly parts of you. And then I would ask a lot more questions about that too. But and because he did that, he's inviting you into a relationship with him that is better than any other relationship that you can have. I've experienced peace, true lasting peace, that I don't have to worry or be anxious. It just kind of depends on the person that you're talking to, but especially in a context like Bosnia, ask a lot of questions because everyone has a different worldview. So, like, you don't feel like anybody loves you. Well, let me tell you about someone who really, really does.
Yeah. And my assumption, you use ugly parts of you or the bad parts of you, not because because you're not willing to use the word sin, but probably because that phrasing is probably more helpful.
It depends on the person, right?
Yeah.
Most Muslims understand sin.
Yes.
A lot. They understand it quite a bit. Like, we are gross people, right? And so, but depends on the person. But I've had, like, friends here that are like, but I'm a good person.
Yeah.
I'm fine. Like, yeah, but you're not. And so tell me, like, did you lie today or yesterday, or, things like that. And, like, so it's a processing based on the person and what they're experiencing, and where the Spirit is like, hey, ask about this.
For sure. Yeah. And the reason I felt the need to say that, because there may be some people listening, like, well, Abby, you didn't mention the word sin. Like, that's not, like, you should have done that. And I'm not saying that you should have, because I think there are some, and I think when I came to Christ, all I knew was that I was sinful and I was messed up.
Yeah.
I needed a savior. Jesus was the answer to that. And now I have a relationship with God. I mean, it's very simplistic.
Yeah.
But I didn't need to know what true justification meant, or sanctification. Yeah. I didn't need to know all that stuff. That post salvation, all of that stuff kind of starts to flush out, and we learn all that stuff. So I think there's some people that are like, well, Abby, if you don't say these specific things.
Well, we talk about Christianese all the time, right? Yeah. Christianese is the language and the words that we use that people are like, I don't actually know what that means.
Yeah.
Right? And so it depends on the person. If you have someone that's had a church background and is like, I don't actually believe it.
Yeah.
They'll know all the words. They'll know
Yeah.
the context of it. And so, yeah, just get to know the person.
Yes.
Let the Spirit point out the things that you need to ask and prompt and nudge. And
Yeah, for sure.
all of our evangelism conversations are taking initiative in the power of the Spirit to share the gospel. And
That's right. There's a reason I think that the Lord didn't give us a 5-step
Right.
way. Like, this is how you have to do it.
Well, yeah, I don't know. As an engineer, like, we're often given a problem and been like, okay, figure out how to solve it,
Yeah.
right? And so if we're given an assignment by Jesus, we don't have to figure it out because he's with us always. And so that's freeing for me personally. But
For sure. Well, before I let you go, how can we be praying for you? And you and Paul specifically, how can, for those listening and they're, Lord, when they would take some time here as they're listening, how can we specifically be praying for you and Paul?
Yeah. I think we would both probably say that we would love prayer for, like surrender and awe of God's holiness, and being filled with the Spirit in all aspects of life. It's very hard to jump from work to school to activities to church things, like and say, hey, I'm good at this or I'm not good at this, so I'll rely on the Spirit here, but I won't here. Yeah. So I think both of us really struggle with that sometimes and would love prayer for filling of the Spirit and relying on the Spirit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Abby, for being on the podcast today and your heart for missions. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the House on Fire podcast. Our prayer is that this podcast activates your home for Jesus. May the light of Christ burn bright through you and yours. Until next time.